Two security guards moved in to push the man out. The first shoved him hard. The old man staggered, caught himself on the piano's edge, then straightened. He didn't retaliate, didn't even glare. He simply placed one hand on the polished black lacquer, fingers rough and calloused. Richard raised a manicured hand. "Wait," he commanded. The guards stopped instantly. Richard's grin spread, theatrical. He turned to the guests like a showman introducing an act. "Why waste a perfectly good spectacle? Let's make this interesting." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The guests leaned forward, hungry for entertainment. "One song," Richard declared. "If this gentleman," he let the word drip with mockery, "can make even one person shed a tear, I'll personally buy him the most expensive meal here and throw in $1,000. He paused, letting the tension rise. But if he fails, he crawls back to the gutter where he belongs. Cheers and laughter broke out. Someone shouted, 10 seconds before he gives up." Wagers were whispered over clinking glasses. The old man didn't flinch. He nodded once. "One song," he repeated, his voice steady. Emily bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. She wanted to scream at them, to tell them this wasn't a game. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak. She could only watch as the man lowered himself onto the bench. They laughed when the homeless man laid his trembling hands on the $200,000 piano. 7 seconds later, the chandeliers were trembling, and so were they. The grand legacy ballroom glittered like a jewelry box, its polished marble floors reflecting the light of 1,000 crystals overhead. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne and oysters. The air smelled of money, perfume, and power, the kind of scent that lingers only in places where fortunes are made and broken with a handshake. At the far end of the hall, an archway framed a stark silhouette. A man stood there, ragged and unmoving, like a misplaced shadow among the glitter. His army green jacket was frayed at the cuffs, his boots scuffed and dusty. He looked like he didn't belong, because he didn't. The laughter faded into confused murmurs as he stepped forward. His voice cut through the hum, rough and unpolished. "Can I play it for food?" The room froze. Heads turned, pearls clicked against wine glasses. For half a second there was silence. Then laughter erupted, high and brittle, echoing off the chandeliers. Phones rose like weapons, screens glowing. Some guests started recording, eager for a clip to share later. "Look at this crazy old guy at the gala." Richard Thompson, the evening's host and one of the city's most ruthless businessmen, turned slowly toward the man. His Italian tuxedo fit him like armor, his smile sharp as a blade. He held a crystal glass aloft and let the crowd quiet just enough to hear him. "Touch that Fazioli," Richard said, gesturing toward the grand piano gleaming on its platform, "and the bill will cost more than your life." Laughter swelled again, emboldened by his cruelty. The ragged man didn't blink. His pale blue eyes swept the room, not in fear, but in calculation, the way a soldier measures terrain. "Not charity," he said quietly. "An exchange. One song. For one plate." By the service doors, Emily Carter froze mid-step. A tray trembled in her hands. She was 22, a social work student drowning in tuition and debts, working double shifts at the hotel just to survive. When she looked at the man's stance, the way his shoulders stayed straight despite his obvious exhaustion, her chest tightened. She had seen that posture before in her grandfather, a veteran who never truly came home from the war. That quiet dignity of someone carrying a weight too heavy for words. She started forward instinctively, but the hotel manager grabbed her arm. "Stay back," he hissed. "Don't you dare interfere, Emily. You want to lose your job?" Emily froze, helpless, shame burning her cheeks. He sat completely still, hands resting in his lap while the ballroom buzzed with anticipation. Richard smirked, arms crossed. "Any day now, maestro." The man lifted his right hand slowly and pressed a single key. Middle C rang out like a bell, pure and clear. It cut through the noise, startling in its beauty. A few guests glanced at each other, confused. This wasn't the fumbling of a street performer. This was controlled. Then came another note, and another. They formed a simple melody, haunting in its starkness. The laughter faltered. Emily's breath caught. She felt the sound settle into her chest like a memory. It reminded her of the lullabies her grandfather used to hum when he couldn't sleep, back when nightmares haunted him more than any enemy ever could. The man's left hand joined in, deep and resonant. Slowly, the melody grew. It wasn't Beethoven or Chopin. It was something older, rawer, a soldier's lament born of mud, rain, and letters never sent. The room leaned in, phones lowered. Even Richard's smirk began to tremble. And then the mask slipped.
His right hand blurred. For 10 seconds, the room ceased to exist. Arpeggios cascaded like water over stone. Trills screamed like radio static in a storm. Octaves thundered and vanished. The man's hands moved so fast they became a blur, a storm of precision and fury unleashed. Gasps erupted. A woman clutched her pearls. A man's wine glass rattled against the table. The chandeliers above seemed to vibrate as if the music itself had weight. When it ended, the melody returned to its simple, sorrowful refrain, leaving the audience stunned. Silence filled the ballroom thick, suffocating. The guests sat frozen, staring at the shabby figure at the piano as if seeing him for the first time. Emily's tears fell freely now. She didn't bother to wipe them away. Richard stumbled back a step. No, this is some trick," he stammered. "He's manipulating you." The pianist Walter lifted his gaze for the first time. His pale blue eyes burned with quiet fire. "Music tells the truth," he said softly. "You can mock a man. You can't outshout a memory." He turned back to the keys. "This isn't just a song for a meal," he added. "It's a song for a mirror." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some unable to meet his eyes. The next chord struck like lightning. Walter's hands crashed down, launching into a tempest of sound. This was no longer a plea. It was a battle cry. The music roared through the hall, rolling left-hand thunder, right-hand lightning slicing through the storm. Dissonance clashed with harmony. Anger collided with grief. Each note demanded to be heard. Richard shouted over the chaos, his voice cracking. "Stop this! You're humiliating us!" But no one looked at Richard anymore. Emily pressed her hands to her mouth, trembling. The music didn't just sound like war, it felt like it. She could see it in Walter's posture, the way his body surged with each phrase. It was as if he were fighting invisible enemies, every chord a strike, every rest a moment to breathe before the next attack. At the edge of the stage, Abram Stevens, white-haired, leaning on his cane, stood rooted in place. His eyes filled with tears. He had heard whispers decades ago, stories passed between soldiers, a corporal who could find broken pianos in bombed-out ruins and, for 4 minutes, make men remember they were human. Could this be him? The storm built and built until it seemed the room itself would shatter. Chandeliers swayed. Guests gripped their chairs, their pearls, their cufflinks, as though the music might tear them open. And then silence. The final chord hung like a ghost, fading into nothingness. Walter sat still, his breathing steady, his hands hovering above the keys. The quiet that followed was crushing.
Richard's face was pale, his power crumbling. "You spoke of value," Walter said into the silence. His voice carried to every corner of the hall. "You measured me by my clothes, by your arrogance. Tell me, Richard, what value do you bring to this room now?" Richard opened his mouth, but no words came, only air. A whisper began at the back of the room. "Hayes. Walter Hayes." It spread, rippling through the crowd until it became a chorus. Hayes. Walter Hayes. Someone pulled up a grainy black-and-white photo on their phone. A young soldier sat at a battered upright piano, helmet on, eyes sharp and pale even in the faded image. The resemblance was undeniable. "Corporal Walter Hayes," Abram said, his voice breaking with awe. "Son, you saved more nights than the history books ever recorded." Gasps swept the room. The irony hit like a punch. The entire gala was to raise funds for a new veteran support center, a place meant to help men like Walter, and yet here he had been, mocked and scorned. Walter rose from the bench. He stood taller now, the disguise of frailty gone. "I gave $5 million to build that center," he said simply. "Anonymous. Money is easy. What's hard is measuring the hearts trusted to lead it." His gaze locked on Richard. "Consider yourself measured." The crowd turned. Richard swayed like a man on a sinking ship. Walter's next words cut like a blade. "Effective immediately, Richard Thompson is removed from this project." No one protested. No one defended him. The silence itself condemned him more than any vote could. Richard stumbled backward, then fled, tuxedo flapping like a defeated banner. Walter turned toward the service doors. His expression softened as he spotted Emily, still clutching her tray. "You," he said gently. "What's your name?" Emily Carter," she stammered. "You moved first when it cost you something," Walter said. "What do you study?" "Social work." "Your tuition is covered," Walter said, voice steady. "And when you graduate, there will be a desk waiting for you at the center." Emily's hands flew to her mouth. Tears spilled again, but this time they were radiant. Walter faced Abram. "We need a chair who can build and still listen." Abram squared his shoulders. "It would be my honor." Walter nodded once. He gathered the crumpled bills Richard had tossed on the piano like an insult and placed them in Emily's palms. "It belongs where compassion lives," he said softly. Then he set his fingertips on the keys one last time, not to play, only to feel. "Music can't be bought," he murmured. "It can only be paid for." He walked toward the archway. The crowd split without a word, parting like water. Some lowered their eyes. Some whispered, "Thank you." None dared to stop him. At the threshold, the anxious hotel manager stumbled forward. "Mr. Hayes, sir, I didn't know, please, forgive me." Walter's look was not angry. It was a mirror. The apology died unspoken. Walter turned and walked away. The heavy doors closed with a soft thud. The room remained silent long after he was gone. Conversation didn't return so much as reform, quieter, truer, stripped of arrogance. In the weeks that followed, the Veteran Support Center rose in the heart of the city. Steel beams reached skyward, walls closed around sunlight. Abram oversaw construction with steady hands. Emily became its lifeblood, greeting each veteran by name, her compassion woven into every corner. The first thing visitors saw when they entered was a black-and-white photo of a young corporal at a battered piano. Beneath it, "Music can heal where words cannot." Walter didn't attend the opening ceremony. Some claimed they saw him later in a small-town diner, sipping coffee with the calm of a man who needed nothing from the world. Others swore he'd returned to a secluded estate, silent and watchful. No one truly knew. But the legend remained. The Grand Legacy Ballroom never forgot that night. Stories spread, told in whispers, in newspaper columns, in late-night conversations. The night when arrogance turned to shame, when laughter turned to tears, when a ghost stepped out of the shadows to remind a city what truly mattered. And somewhere, in a quiet room with no audience, Walter Hayes sat once more at a piano. His fingers traced the keys with calm authority. The music filled the space with truth. For legends do not need applause, they only need to be remembered. If Walter's story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of what true worth means. Comment respect if a moment in his song touched your heart, and subscribe for more hidden valor stories each week. Your voice keeps this community alive.